Back before I got into heavy sandbag lifting, I would often ask myself, what can I do in my training now using traditional gym equipment to set myself up for future success in any field? How can I tailor my training to prepare me for what might be required if I choose to specialize in something? Wrestling is a good example. I would focus on barbell exercises that I thought might make me a stronger wrestler, even though I didn't wrestle. The planche is another good one. How can I strengthen my body now so I can start at a higher level when I commit to learning the planche? I think this is a great mindset to have. Of course, to become skilled in anything specific like that, you'll need specific practice, but the idea of using the gym to prepare yourself for something more than just building muscle or just lifting a barbell, even if you never actually end up doing it, gives your training purpose and makes this whole thing a lot more fun. I've since realized heavy sandbag lifting is a good answer to many of those what-if scenarios. It builds the ultimate base layer of transferable general strength, power, and muscle. Sandbag lifting sets you up for anything where strength is required, but what about setting yourself up for lifting sandbags? If you don't have access to a sandbag now, or you're not yet ready to make the switch, or even if you are lifting sandbags but want to shape your other training into something that will carry over, what can you do to prepare yourself? I think I can help with that. After specializing in heavy sandbag lifting for a long time now, I have a few ideas to get you started. To keep things organized and to keep from repeating myself, first I'll discuss the muscles you'll want to focus on, then I'll go over specific abilities you'll want to improve, and I'll end by giving you some exercise examples you can use in your training to develop these things. I'll split this into three categories: the core, the glutes, hamstrings, and upper back, and the forearms and biceps. If all you did was make each of these muscles bigger and stronger, you'd be well on your way, but let's get into specifics. The core is probably the most important part of this entire video. You'll want to prioritize it above all else if you can. By core, I mean the midsection of your body, the abs, obliques, low back, and every other muscle in the area. The core has a lot of potential to leak energy. There's no solid bone to rely on for structural support. Everything comes down to the size and strength of your muscles, and your ability to utilize those muscles with proper breathing and bracing. To be good at lifting sandbags, and to keep yourself safe, you need a core that's thick and strong all the way around in 360 degrees. The more muscle you can add to this part of your body, the more mass you'll have to rely on when trying to move heavy weights, and the more likely you are to succeed. I was reminded of how important this is when I recently cut all the way down to a pretty shredded 150 pounds. With less mass in my core, just because there wasn't much fat left, it became much more difficult to stay tight when lifting a sandbag, especially when it was at chest height or higher, like when trying to do the sandbag to shoulder. If I could recommend just one thing you can start doing now to help prepare yourself for heavy sandbag lifting, it would be to train your core hard, heavy, and often. Next, let's look at the glutes, hamstrings, and upper back. These are your power muscles, your movers. A well-developed core will help to keep you stable, but your glutes, hamstrings, and upper back will be doing the heavy lifting. Adding as much size as you can to these muscles will give you a much higher potential for strength and power. Think of Olympic weightlifters. They're basically walking representations of this. An Olympic lifter relies on these power-generating muscles to perform the snatch and clean and jerk, and it shows. You'll want the same. Last, let's look at the biceps, or more specifically, all the muscles of the upper arm involved with flexion of the elbow, and the forearms. Your arms are your connection to the sandbag. It doesn't matter how strong your core or mover muscles are. If you don't have the arm strength to keep hold of a sandbag, you'll be stuck lifting light weights. Many lifters who move from barbells to sandbags learn this lesson after their first session. The arms are usually the weakest link, and it can take a while for them to catch up, which means slower progress initially. If you can focus on these areas now and make your arms strong and muscular with basic stuff like curls and pull-ups, you'll start at a much higher place when you do begin working with sandbags. Now, let's move on to abilities you'll want to improve. Many of these are general concepts and can be trained in any number of different ways. Also, just so you know, these are in no particular order of importance. Working on all of them is a good idea. First is starting strength, or the ability to generate power from a dead stop position. To better understand why this is important, it can help to imagine sandbag lifting as being more like a barbell deadlift than a squat. With a squat, you can make use of the rebound effect. Because the movement starts with an eccentric lowering phase, you, in a way, reverse motion rather than creating it when squatting back up. With a deadlift, however, you have to move the weight from a complete dead stop off the ground. You need the strength to go from 0 to 100 instantly. This is what it's like when lifting sandbags, only you'll need that starting strength from many different positions, so working with exercises like pin squats or block pulls from different heights is recommended. More on that later. The next two go together and lead into the following two. You'll want powerful hips and powerful triple extension strength, or the simultaneous extension of the ankles, knees, and hips. This is how you generate power, which you'll need a lot of to lift heavy sandbags. That leads on to the second pair. I plan on making an entire video on this in the future, just because I think it's kind of cool, but sandbag lifting can be thought of as jumping and throwing, more specifically a vertical jump and throwing something up and over your head. To jump or throw, you initiate the movement by first crouching down, storing up energy like a spring ready to uncoil, then exploding out of that position by extending the joints, again, triple extension, using that energy to create as much power as you can. These are all things you'll want to focus on if sandbag lifting is your goal. Next, let's look at the arms. While big and strong biceps and forearms are important, more than anything, you'll want to be strong in a neutral grip position. A lot of sandbag lifting is done with a neutral grip, and many lifters haven't spent much time strengthening it as it's not used when lifting barbells, so it's possible the neutral grip will be a weak point for you. You'll want to make an effort to bring it up. There is a lot of potential for strength in this position. Look at arm wrestlers for motivation if you want to see what's possible at the extreme level. After some dedicated work, you'll probably end up surprising yourself with how strong you've become. Making your training more geared towards lifting sandbags could be as simple as doing hammer curls rather than standard curls, or doing your pull-ups with a neutral grip. You'll want a strong grip and strong wrists, specifically in a static position. Most of the time when lifting sandbags, you'll be forced to support the weight with your wrists in a static flexed position. That could be with a full 90-degree angle false grip or closer to completely straight. You'll want to strengthen this from as many different angles as you can. Again, it might be worth looking to arm wrestlers for advice on how to strengthen a flexed wrist position in a traditional gym setting. This next one can be huge. You'll want to condition your body for weighted walking. One of the primary and most beneficial exercises with a sandbag is the carry. If you haven't conditioned yourself for moving with heavy weight, you can overdo it. It will help if you start adding some lightweight carries to your training now to prepare yourself. Even something as simple as rucking with a 30-pound pack can get you started. Eventually move into heavy carries like farmer's carries or zercher carries is a good idea. This will condition your ankles, knees, and hips for what's to come, and also gets you familiar with what it's like to move with heavy weight. It's completely different from static exercises, and you'll need all the practice you can get. Another note on this, I can't say for sure one is better than any other, and I honestly don't care to take sides, but you may want to work on changing your stride. Most of us walk with a harsh heel strike, which is fine with cushioned shoes on concrete, but when moving with heavy weight, you may wish to move more like you would when walking barefoot through the woods. When you walk on uneven terrain, you often step with more of a forefoot strike rather than a heel strike. I found when doing carries, switching over to something closer to that barefoot walking style helps me to stay more consistent and deliberate with every step, and keeps me more balanced. The debate on which walking style is correct is this whole thing, well beyond the scope of this video. Just know it might be worth trying out the more athletic barefoot walking style when working with your carries. Another thing you'll want to work on is your ability to strain with heavy weights. Any powerlifter will tell you the strength of your muscles isn't enough. If you want to move max effort heavy weights, you need practice. You need to develop the skill of maxing out. If you train exclusively with higher rep sets, you may not yet have this ability, which is fine with traditional gym equipment, but it won't work with sandbags. The thing is, past a certain point with sandbags, most likely very early on in your training, even if you could lift a weight for 10 reps, it will probably still feel like a max effort lift. With barbells, squats, you might not reach the point of forever heavy until you're already well into the advanced stage of your training. For almost everyone, a back squat with 5 plates will never stop feeling heavy, even if you can squat 7. With sandbags, that always heavy place might come as early as just 150 to 200 pounds, which means if you don't know how to push against heavy weights that feel extremely heavy, you'll be at a huge disadvantage. Sandbags are just like that. They're an all-or-nothing training style, and developing your ability to push and strain with heavy weights now will pay off later on. You also need to consider that you'll need this ability with both slow and fast-moving movements. It's one thing to do a max-effort, slow-moving deadlift. It's another thing entirely to push a power movement, like a heavy clean, to the limits of what's possible with heavy weight. Think back to what I said earlier about sandbag lifting being like throwing something up and over your head. Throwing something light with max power is a totally different skill from throwing something very heavy, and sandbag lifting requires both, so you'll want to practice in as many different ways as you can. Max strength with slow-moving movements, max power with heavy weight, and max ballistic power with lighter weights. You'll also want to improve your squeezing strength. This isn't something done very often at all in a traditional gym setting, but it's essential for holding on to an awkward sandbag. This is known as bear hug strength. You'll need the power to squeeze something tight, isometrically, with a death grip for a long time. Finally, you'll want anti-core strength. Another trait rarely trained in the gym, you'll want your core to be strong at resisting movement in all directions. You've probably trained for part of this with heavy movements like deadlifts or squats, bracing your core to prevent your spine from rounding forward, but have you trained yourself to prevent sideways bend or bending at an angle in every direction? Sandbags work constantly to throw you off center, and you'll need the strength to resist. Now on to some specific exercises. The list of things you could do in the gym to prepare yourself for lifting heavy sandbags is probably a lot longer than this, but here are a few I like and have experience with myself. First, there's the snatch and the clean. Sandbag lifting is often seen as a more rugged version of Olympic weightlifting, and for good reason. The similarities between the two sports can't be ignored. Olympic lifting works your body in almost the exact same way that sandbags do. You'll get that explosive triple extension strength and strong hips, starting strength. They're like a jump and a throw. You'll work your ability to strain, and most of the muscles associated with sandbags will grow. I'd also add the snatch grip high pull and kettlebell or plate swings to the list for the exact same reasons. Very similar to Olympic weightlifting, just without the weight, I'd also add vertical and box jumps. These are a bit less specific than an actual clean or snatch, but improving your ability to jump high to generate a lot of power with your lower body will help. Next, there's the barbell good morning. It's hard to top this exercise for building a powerful posterior chain, and you'll need it for sandbags. Getting as strong as humanly possible with the exercise is a good idea. Many lifters have used the good morning to add a significant amount of weight to their deadlift without actually doing the deadlift, as an example. And while sandbags do require a bit more than a basic barbell deadlift, generally a stronger posterior chain does mean a stronger sandbag lifter. Next, there's the Pendlay row and the deadlift row. These are both dead stop rows from the ground that teach you to be powerful and explosive, develop starting strength, and build muscle everywhere you want it. Pendlay rows are great because they force you to maintain a horizontal torso angle when lifting explosively from the ground, which is a skill you'll need for the one motion sandbag to shoulder if you plan on working with that. And deadlift rows are great for just conditioning yourself to give everything you have. They're a pure power movement, and they get you used to the mindset you'll need to be in for sandbag lifting. Next, let's talk about squats. In general, sandbag lifting is a more posterior chain dominant sport than it is quad dominant, but your preferred lifting style and your predisposition for strength or power can impact this a lot. For squats, I'm going to recommend the Zercher or front squat positions done in both the normal way and off of pins set at different heights. Front squats force you to stay more upright and can be thought of as more of a pure strength movement. If you're generally better at ultra heavy, slow moving strength than you are power, the front squat will probably help you more, as it teaches you to strain in a way that's very specific to the sandbag lifting style you'll probably use. I'm personally the opposite, but some guys are actually able to shoulder heavy sandbags by front squatting them. It's very impressive. On the other hand, if you're more of a power-based, fast-moving lifter, you might prefer the Zercher squat. You can get away with bending over more during this one and transferring even more of the load onto the posterior chain rather than the quads, and something about it just suits a powerful lifting style. I realize in isolation, if we weren't talking about these exercises in the context of carryover to lifting heavy sandbags, both front squats and Zercher squats could be used to build both max power and max strength, but for carryover to sandbags, this has been my experience comparing the two. It's always worth improving every aspect of your lifting, so doing both is probably a good idea, but some lifters may favor one over the other. Doing these squats from a dead stop off of pins can also be used to improve starting strength at different positions, which will come in handy when you start working with sandbags. While we're on the topic of Zercher squats, the Zercher carry is another great exercise. In many ways, it's similar to a sandbag bear hug carry and will get you used to moving with heavy weight. I recommend mixing up how you do it. Going for a full 1 to 2 minutes will teach you the meaning of pushing through fatigue, and going heavier for 30 seconds builds a lot of strength quickly. I would use this same guide for the farmer's carry as well. If you have a trap bar available, start loading that thing up and walking around with it. It's one of the best exercises, period, and it will develop the muscles needed for lifting sandbags. One-arm carry variations are great too. Suitcase carries or one-arm dumbbell carries do the same thing as a farmer's carry, while also building that anti-core strength you'll need to keep from falling over when working with an off-center sandbag. Next is the push press. This one might be unexpected, but it has multiple uses. First, if you plan on pressing a sandbag overhead and lifting the most amount of weight possible is the goal, adding leg drive to the movement will help. Learning proper push press technique now with an easier implement like a barbell will prepare you. The push press also forces your body to work in a similar way to how it will when doing the sandbag to shoulder. When a sandbag is on your chest and you're trying to heave it up onto your shoulder, you have to rely mainly on your knees and ankles to generate power. You can't bend at the hips much like you would when using true triple extension because the weight would fall out in front of you. This is exactly how you do a push press, generating power with the lower body while keeping hold of something at chest level, then transferring that power into the object. In many ways, the two movements are the same. On the topic of pressing, there's the landmine press and the one-arm dumbbell press. These things aren't nearly as specific to lifting sandbags as some of the other movements are, but they fall into the category of might as well. If you're already doing pressing in your training, you might as well do one-arm variations, as they give your core that anti-strength I mentioned earlier. To press with one arm, your core needs to resist bending to the side, just like when lifting an off-center sandbag. The power versions of these movements can be even more specific, like the alternating landmine press or one-arm dumbbell push press. I made an entire video on that. I'll have it linked in the description if you're interested. Speaking of videos, I just released one on this next exercise as well, the neutral grip pull-up. I'll have it linked below too if you want to watch it, but to summarize, the neutral grip pull-up strengthens your arms in a neutral position, which is essential for lifting sandbags. If you squeeze your arms together while you do it, you can also improve your bear hug squeezing strength, and if you use a false grip, it strengthens that flexed wrist position, which again, you'll need for lifting a heavy sandbag. If you're doing pull-ups already, you might as well use this variation for at least a few of your sets. Last but not least, while we're talking about the neutral grip, there's Swiss bar curls and dumbbell hammer curls. If I could start over and was preparing myself for lifting heavy sandbags, I'd work these into the ground. Aside from core strength, making your arms strong in this position is likely to have the biggest impact on your sandbag lifting, and will prevent the bottleneck that usually happens for most lifters, stalling progress while they play catch-up, spending weeks or months strengthening their lagging arms. If you want to prepare yourself for lifting sandbags, start doing your neutral grip curls and pull-ups hard, heavy, and as often as you can. And that's all I can think of for now. Hopefully this helped and gave you some ideas for your training. I'm sure there are more great exercises I either forgot or haven't tried myself. Let me know if you have any you'd add to the list, or if you'd add anything at all. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.